This is the NeoBooks Call for Monday, January 20th, 2025. Today was Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C. in the United States. So there was a bit of a spectacle in the Capitol today. But we don't have to talk about that. We could talk about NeoBooks and bright futures ahead.
Just quickly, two things. My wife's been referring to today as Doomsday for some time. And we decided to skip the inauguration, of course, and to watch instead Rebecca Solnit speak about it. This is the right URL this time. I did correct it, sorry.
Oh, good. So the other one was the wrong.
Yes, no, I did correct it in the other, in the other one as well.
Thank
so
you,
if you want to listen to it, it's an hour and a half about community and how to build community and what qualities to build up against the qualities that are ascendant right now. Humor was there, by the way.
Well, that sounds good. Love that.
Tenderness, humor, these were the kinds of things that were spoken about. It was a beautiful, very heartwarming moment. I needed that.
I was this morning at an international conference about bioregions. Was hosted by a European group, and they had representatives from Spain, Greece, Netherlands, and about 10 countries, and did presentations about what it takes to build a bioregion-specific community. That was very refreshing and much better than watching the inauguration for sure.
Klaus, that's really interesting because I've been following the bioregional movement too, and this morning I didn't go actually, but this morning I've with a group that comes out of Canada actually, and they were doing some films this morning, which I missed because they were at 5 o'clock in the morning and I chose sleep. But there is a really strong, kind of growing movement around not bioregionalism as well as community networking and working out how to do things differently. And I can feel a swell different to the one more than I have before, which is this kind of counterbalance. It's really interesting to see, and I think also too we're part of that.
I think we've gone this direction before a little bit on this call. I'm not sure, but Jack, combining your guilds and topic quests with Klaus, you're interested in bioregionalism, with Jose, sort of the platforms and foundations of thinking. There's possibly an interesting opportunity to create a global game that starts out just as a game, but it has bioregional and watershed boundaries, and it involves cooperation, and it occasionally involves crossing over into the real world and doing stuff together. And it involves principles of collaboration. It involves a whole series of things that can ladder up to being a serious platform for getting things done collaboratively, but it doesn't start that way because then it gets stamped out or it's too aspirational. It needs to start as something that's sort of playful, like serious fun. But I wish this is in my wish list. And if I were good at writing science fiction or decided to go use like ChatGPT to create a sci-fi book, it might have a plot like this. But it's maybe a little bit like The Last Starfighter or Ender's Game or one of the sci-fi novels where there's kind of a fiction behind. In The Last Starfighter, a really old B-movie science fiction thing, there's a video game that shows up magically at a gas station out in the middle of nowhere. And the child in the household, the boy in the household, gets really good at playing this video game. And it turns out that he's actually fighting a real spaceship and shooting down real aliens and out in the world and saving the galaxy. And then the two worlds basically collide and intermingle in ways that I've completely forgotten. I don't know the rest of the plot. But anyway, this is just my wishful thinking.
I just posted the event that I attended this morning. It's called Bioregional Hope. Well, it was very charming. I mean, each one of these 7 regions created a 10-minute film showcasing their community and the work they were doing in their community. to create a sense of place. And then there was a discussion where over 400 people dialed in from all over the world.
That sounds lovely. Any memorable things that people said?
No, I mean it was basically showcasing that yeah, they had a couple US speakers, actually indigenous leaders who spoke of the bioregion concept and watershed-based regions and so on. And I mean, the point just is, and this is what I've been promoting for the last 2 years, is that you can't change the system top down. You have to change it bottom up. And in order to change it bottom up, it has to be decentralized as much as possible. You want to support it from with tools and processes and best practice experiences and so on, but it has to be local community based. And so this was just an encouragement, saying here's what we do in our region. So it's there, but then I mean, no overwhelming insights, just an affirmation, I would say.
Thanks, Marc-Antoine.
Trying to think about your question about guilds and games. Something I'd like to report on, we've been having, as we said yesterday, this discussion with Samhan. And we've been having a good conversation about, I spoke about scoring, but the question is really, what are we scoring for? And I speak about behaviors, right? The scoring for cooperation, scoring for deep listening, scoring for thinking, meta, all these behaviors we want to encourage. And one person there was saying, oh, I made a mistake of speaking about game rules. And rules are the most basic level of how things are regulated. It's the or else condition. Above rules, you have what was the succession? I think it was functions, models, and systems was this hierarchy. And it's very much from system thinking and systems analysis. And it took me a while to understand that what he meant function, he meant really the functions that regulate the model. A model is built of functions. But I said those functions are emergent and they're not exactly related to the micro behavior. These are our macro analysis functions, if I understood well what you're saying, and he didn't contradict me. And I agree totally with the emergent aspect. The question is what are the micro behaviors that are helping create the emergent macro model? And I'm totally with you, Klaus, that it has to be emergent, but we have to be thinking at both levels. On the other hand, think globally, act locally. It's about what, and part of that is a very empirical question. What helps constructive patterns emerge? What helps? We had a whole discussion about the pros and cons of free speech versus regulating hate speech, and in a way that was an empirical question. And did Nazism, did either do much to prevent the rise of Nazism? I would argue that Europe did manage to keep it down for a while until it got overwhelmed with social media that embodied free speech values. But it's not proof either. It's an interesting question. What is the correspondence between micro and macro? It's probably not linear. It's probably very hard to study. On the other hand, I think it's vital to study it. So yeah, that's it. Bioregions are extremely important because this is where you get the climax. And at the boundary between bioregion is where you get the change. So you need to study both. And that's
so say that again, or go deeper into why the bioregion matters in that way.
It's where the climax, the equilibrium happens at in the bioregion. right? You
Okay.
have an ecosystem that's reached a certain equilibrium and is kind of functioning. And at the boundary between bioregions is where you have basically different bioregions interfacing, and there's always innovation at the interface. And both are important. You need stability and you need change. And I think it's very important to study it from both angles. That's what I'm trying to say. Of course, in a way, the interface is a bioregion. Like I remember of the pelagic region is an important bioregion, and it's the interface between land and sea. And same with marshes and so on. But it remains true. I think when we're thinking about requisite diversity, we're very much thinking in guilds about guild diversity, how to ensure that there's enough diversity of approaches. But some of that is within the ecosystem of, for example, a bioregion. And there is always internal diversity, one hopes. And there is diversity in clash of totally different worldviews and different mental or physical ecosystems. I see a lot of hands. Over.
Klaus.
Yeah, there are two ways to think of bioregion. One is more or less watershed based, so
Yeah.
there is a unique condition within nature that requires for the land to be used and treated to grow food in specific ways. So the natural resource base is unique. And we see this in Europe, where you have a very specific cultures that evolved around watersheds that provided specific types of food over generations and generations, right? So the food is different, even within France, let's say, or within Germany, based on the conditions of the soil, availability of water, climate, and so on. So that's one type of watershed bioregion, watershed-based bioregion. The other thing is just community-based. So when you are in a big city, for example, all the food comes in from the outside anyway, but you still have to adapt, to the realities of a natural world, and you should respect the limitations nature has. That should inform the way you consume, and interact at the local level. So there are those two thoughts that are complementary, right? They're not competing.
Thanks, Klaus. I put in the chat that I thought watersheds could be sometimes quite small, and then the larger water-related phenomenon is basins. Like I live in the middle of the Columbia River Basin, which is huge, and
Right.
Portland is located on the Willamette River, which is a branch that drains into the Columbia, but is its own sort of set of watersheds, I think. But for me, the bioregion would be the Pacific Northwest, and I have no idea where I notably probably have zero idea where the bioregion that I live in begins and ends. I have no clue what its boundaries are, but I can tell you what those rivers are, and where the crests of the mountains are that divide the river falling this way from the river falling that way. So for me, watersheds are very easy to illustrate, but I'm always trying to figure out why are bioregions. That's why I asked you to repeat what you said earlier, Marc-Antoine. Why bioregions matter as much and how they matter, like how they factor in. Jack.
So Marc-Antoine was saying that the innovation occurs, the action occurs at the borders of the regions where there's mixing. I just wanted to build on that with a talk that I heard at an A-Life conference in Albuquerque in the early 90s. A fellow was talking about cultural artifacts, and he said that where you want cultural innovation, it occurs at the borders between different cultures. And his paper was called 6 O'Clock News. He said, if you want to know what's new, you go to the borders. You don't go to the middle. And there's a uniformity in that image. So whether it's a bioregion or a cultural region, the innovation occurs where mixing comes from other places.
In the early days of OGM, I was describing OGM as an estuary because I was picturing us as being the mixing grounds for a variety of different audiences and groups, which I think we haven't turned out to be. We were sort of mostly us who show up regularly, and I don't really know how different we are, but I love the metaphor. And estuaries are where salt water meets fresh, and there are tremendous innovation zones. They're also, unfortunately, where cities meet oceans, and that means that's where humans put down settlements. So most of our estuarine real estate has been eaten up by civilizations that pave them over. Few of them exist in their natural form, I'm afraid. Go ahead, Marc-Antoine.
Good observation. I was going to argue cities are, it's not at a boundary in the human life, it's in the cities, because cities is where the mixing happens much more than at the boundary in some ways, or at least not only at the boundary, it's also in the center of the metropolitan cities. Anyway, I just realized I brought in this notion of systems and functions because the other thing I was arguing about that is, yeah, function is kind of the macro view, but what's happening at the micro view is very much more patterns and protocols. And this I want to bring Jose back in. I've been looking at this absolutely fascinating upcoming book about system science and why big systems fail, something like that. And Venkatesh Rao, who I don't agree with on everything, but has some always an interesting take, was saying, oh, the cybernetic view of civilization is also high modernist. And he also opposed protocols. I found that interesting. I keep speaking about design patterns as another reading. What are the patterns of, I was going to quote, who spoke about patterns of comedy? But yeah, the patterns of constructive community and of
David Bollier?
Yeah, I think that's right. Thank you. Patterns of pro-social movement, patterns of constructive sense making, patterns of whatever. But it's very hard to design, and there again with class, very hard to design behaviors from the ground up. And I think we need to be empirical and say, well, what works? What behaviors seem to make these things emerge? We don't design from the functions down, we design from the patterns up. So yeah, and yeah, observation is a big part of it. And that's, in a way, when we're, Dave Snowden, I don't know if he would agree, but in a way, that's what I'm taking from what he's saying. When the system is really not just complicated, but complex, it's probe and see what emerges and see if you can detect it and encourage it. And sometimes just take action and see what emerges. It's not going to be purely rationalist, but it's also being attentive to what brings things in a certain direction. And I think that's extremely important. There's a whole anthropological side to social change.
Absolutely.
I'm rambling.
It's okay. I love the Cynefin framework's approach toward probe, sense, and respond, sense, respond, and probe. I've forgotten the order of them, but he just flips these three things around a couple times, and you're like, oh wow, different world. Oh wow, different world. And he shows you. I would love to speak with somebody with a lot more life experience than me as to whether it holds up under pressure in real life situations, but it makes a ton of sense just as a model. And I am one who is leery of conceptual models, and I've met too many people in my life who hang too much, way too much on conceptual models, and to the, you know, including ignoring sometimes contradictory facts. Anyway, Jose.
Marc-Antoine's point about it's hard to design from the bottom. I think it's impossible to design from the bottom. I think the bottom isn't about design. I think it's about projecting, sensing, validating, projecting, sensing, validating, and allowing for what is emergent to be supported by projection. And and so that to me, that sense of recognition that what we need to do collectively in this new thing is stop thinking about designing things in the sense that we are the masters of what will come, but creating environments that fit what we're sensing needs to happen next. And if we can figure out what needs to happen next and support that, then I think that is the direction we should be going in. So I agree. Design can't be done from the bottom.
Let me react a bit, Klaus, if you'll allow me. I'll be very short. On the one hand, full agreement. We cannot design in the sense of we'll do this and this will happen. That's ridiculous. On the other hand, support, creating an environment, creating interventions, and then observing how they pan out. That's all design. We're also trying to design. I'm very much trying to design tools that allow certain behaviors to be possible to see how they emerge. And yes, it's a design work. It's also co-design. It's also I don't know what will happen. That's a fact. But on the other hand, I do my best trying to think, what can I do that could support a certain behavior? And that's design. So that in that sense of design, it still holds. But knowing what will come out of it, yeah, right, bullshit. Klaus, go ahead.
Go ahead, Klaus.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I would struggle with the term design as well, but support, is perfectly possible. So I'm working right now with the national team of the Sierra Club, with the National Grassroots Network, and in fact, I have a 3 o'clock meeting with the Climate Reality Project, which is the Al Gore organization, which is very assertive on a national level. And the mission is to activate the chapters that they have, and they literally have a chapter in almost every county in the United States, to start working on community building, on starting on. So then there's another group I'm just working my way into, which is Neighbor Impact. And Neighbor Impact is yet another group that provides an organizational frame to build a community support system. Yeah. So they are setting up a leadership team, and then they're empowering this leadership team with supporting tools to recruit members, to hold meetings, to have prepared topics and engagements. And they're very active here in Bend, Neighbor Impact, in Oregon in general. So that's what I mean by local engagement, but building sort of meta-level support structures, that empower local folks. Because if somebody would have to start from scratch to build an organization, to have a 501c3 and all of those things, that's overwhelming. But if you can just link in, and build and create a local chapter and then get going. So my mission will be to build tools for these guys. So for example, creating ways to talk about climate change, to ways to explain changing our food system and why this is so important and how it fits together, and speaking multiple languages depending on the audience you are communicating with. So those are all things that we can do. Yeah.
Jack, I'll take it. Jack is asking himself and asking me on the PM. Is this Al Gore initiative something that might be interested in what we're doing with SenseCraft? Would you know?
The question is to Klaus, and the context is Al Gore's activity. To what extent could he benefit from global questing in the climate space?
I started working with them a couple of years ago when agriculture wasn't on their radar. And it took me a while to explain that, because they thought it's just 10% of global emissions and so on. And I got them to understand, no, it's 1/3 of global emissions. And the impact is not just emissions, the impact is the destruction of ecosystems through destruction of the soil. So Al Gore, to his credit, came out with a great presentation. Invited the Secretary of Agriculture at the time, Vilsack, and had Senator Stabenow in there. So he came really in big time, and he set up an organization dedicated to deal with agriculture, food and agriculture. So this is the group I'm now working with, and I have been. So I gave several webinars to explain, took a deep dive into what agriculture is all about. So these guys are very animated and active in their chapters. So that's where the Al Gore organization benefits, from opening up a topic besides energy, that is so important. Yeah, so I mean, are you asking whether he takes personal benefit or just organizational benefit?
No, or he's on a quest, a mission, and we're trying to create an ecosystem that makes questing, big time questing, more powerful to reach more people, even
Right.
get it into schools. And so the question really to you is this something we should talk to the Al Gore group about as one of their opportunities?
Well, I am because I was co-leading this new group for a while, and then so I faced my way out more like an advisor to the group. But definitely, I mean, they are very they're very well resourced. I mean, he was a big money raiser, so and it's international. This year they're doing presentations in Nairobi and in Brazil and I think in France. So they getting people activated to join the Climate Reality Project. So absolutely a very credible organization. And very open to getting consulted, being consulted, getting resourced. So yeah, I found them. I found that in fact they are more organized than the Sierra Club is. I mean, the Sierra Club is like a bunch of cats, running in all directions. Very difficult to move into a common cause. The Citizen Climate Lobby is way too political. They are more concerned about fundraising and not offending anybody, whereas Al Gore doesn't have that issue. So it's a very good group to work with.
So Marc Antoine and I will take this offline with you in an email and build the picture that we want to ask you if it makes sense. Is that okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. You're muted, Jerry.
My apologies. I thought I clicked and unmuted. We still haven't done our homework from a couple weeks ago, which was what are our requirements from NeoBooks? And I thought we might steer our conversation back that way if we want. And partly it was homework for us to do and come think about. But if we were to talk through it together, we might actually get it done.
Let's do it. I agree. I think it's important. I haven't had time. I've worked on requirements for SenseCraft. Unfortunately, some of them will be reproposable. But let me.
Close. You're right next door. Jose, did you have a starting point that you had worked on, or?
I think Jack's would be the starting point person.
Ah,
Yeah, yes, I probably would. And I didn't do some of my homework, which was to come up here today with a summary. However, which I'm still working on, by the way. And that was to do a summary of, the last 4 weeks. And I wanted to include this conversation today and also some of the emails that have been going around as well. So bring that in next week, it'll still be relevant. I did put up in our Mattermost area just a very kind of loose chart of some of the conversation that we had a few weeks ago. I don't know if anyone saw that. I'll just see if I can find it. Anyway, what there was out of it was a conversation. Just find my notes there. Was we had a conversation. I'm just trying to remember if this is one you were at, Jerry, or maybe you might not have been. But the conversation was around kind of the areas. I mapped all the different areas that we were talking about, and they were in. Actually, let me just see if I can find it.
yep. I think I've just found the maps.
Okay,
There's a
great.
components model and the living knowledge system. Those two.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can't drag those into our current.
Thank you. I'm not very good at being able to locate things. No one's as good as you are at this, Jerry.
Sometimes, if it's in my file system, it's dicey. If it's in my brain, it's much easier.
Yeah, sure. So don't get too concerned about the language because I'm just playing with things that I'm learning there. But really, this has been a listening exercise for me, and then trying to draw on my notebook what areas we're tending to talk about and what each of us brings without individualizing it, but what we tend to move around. And the hand-drawn picture is probably my favorite, and the artificially intelligent generated one is probably not that intelligent. But where we were, I know, right? Where we were is looking at that hand-drawn one, is that if we think about our group sort of as this center and what we're bringing in around the edges of this, our conversations are around these sorts of things. We have a lot of, starting with the subjects and topics or nuggets, we have a lot of conversations around what is the topic that we would be talking about. Whether it's a particular, there's a topic-based ones, what topics are. There's also, we talk about what is a nugget, so we try and understand what the definition of nugget is, and then, and from there we often move around. So from here we go into the medium or the platform, which was a conversation about what platform might a NeoBook appear on, and what would be best for that. And there was a conversation, Jerry, around White Wind? White Wind, that's it, White Wind. Whether White Wind would be appropriate for hosting a NeoBook or a NeoBook community or conversation on. We talk about, my thing is about thinking about what the outcomes are, like what would good look like? I know that's probably not the sort of language we tend to use here, but what are we hoping to achieve, and some clarity around that. And I put down there global influence, because why would you start anything smaller? But maybe after this conversation today, there's room for the micro and the meta as well as the global. But what is it that we're wanting to achieve? Moving around a little bit further, we've had a conversation around method and process, and looking a little bit, Jose, at some of the work that you do, which is thinking about the protocols and thinking about how we move through, and bringing some of the tools that we might need to sort of structure what we're doing if we chose to structure. And I'm not just talking about the spreadsheet or those sorts of things, but also talking, Marc-Antoine, some of the things that you bring in about the way we can think about our work and fit, like the the graphic that you brought with the levels in it, for example. So thinking about method and process is about sort of frameworks as well as process. Moving around onto the left side there, there's around contributors and communities, like who is it who might contribute to a NeoBook or NeoBooks or a Nugget, and then whether is that us, is it a wider audience, is it other entities, and then through to communities, who is actually reading, who's engaging, who's picking up a nugget and talking about it and looking at it from another way. And obviously I've got little arrows around there because those people tend to turn into community members, contributors, and there's a lot of movement around that area. And then an audience. And I've maybe inappropriately separated those things out, but there was a conversation around who is our audience. And we had Stacey here at the time, and Stacey said, I think we're the audience. I think it's us currently. When I had a look at what we were doing, I asked a few questions around what our actual footprint is on the ground at the moment, thinking about the impact that NeoBooks might be having right now in the present, in real time, and thinking about some of our own individual audiences, and then where we have collective, some kind of collective audience. And so individual audience might be the Opal Global Mind conversations where you might refer to NeoBooks. It might be where you're doing public speaking or reaching out. It might be classes working with in the soil work and working with farmers. It may sort of work into that area. And audience, the actual audience right now is also anyone who might come across the YouTube videos or go to the Opal Global Mind or just be Googling NeoBooks. So there's a bit of an audience there. They were the areas that I identified that we go through. We had a conversation about how we might, through the process of what we're doing, really just identify where we were at any one time so that we don't just jump from one to the other, that we might, Jerry, use the double loop analogy, that we might sort of signpost that we're in this territory now. Let's everybody talk about this thing. And now we're going to, let's talk about what is a nugget, what's a NeoBook. We're in that territory at the moment. And then we're going to cycle around after a little while, like we've just done this now, and cycle into the next part. Now let's have a conversation about medium and platform. So we could cycle with clear signposts so that we can see where we're going. So I guess that's the map that I saw and I've been listening for the last couple of weeks to see if that's held out, and it pretty much has. And this is the bit I'd like to sort of formalize and put into some writing so that you can have something with that. I think today, for example, we have been talking about our desired outcomes and our global influence. Like I think that's what we've, especially with that first conversation around bioregions and system change and where we can affect change and where we might influence or support, or where we can develop tools. So we've been in that category first. And then with us moving into this conversation, I think we're probably getting closer to the method and the process side of things. We have had quite a few conversations, and it's really important to note this, around the Cynefin framework in terms of sensing, probing, and the next one from that. Someone might help me with the third word there.
Sense, respond. Yeah,
sense, respond. Yeah, so probing, sensing, and responding, and I think we come back to that every few weeks, and I think it's probably worthwhile settling into that and really just becoming familiar with the terms of it and understanding that that if we are going to do a sense and respond, like this might be an opportunity to do that. Last little thing to add there, and this is the bit that I have not included yet, and that is that actually there's two parts of it. One is around the diversity. Jerry, you mentioned it up again today here, and about how we might seek diverse. We've got cognitive diversity within the group, so I don't think we have to feel too bad about that. There's certainly cognitive diversity, and we've got gender diversity growing, and there's probably been a lot more of that. But in my time, I've seen it kind of grow with me, Stacey, Wendy, mostly, and so there's definitely a growth there. The other, or the last thing was, and I've just oh yes, okay, and that what I've noticed is that in the last couple of weeks, Stacey's reached out and she said, hey, we could actually act on something that's already here, and she's put it into an email, and Wendy's also backed that up. And I've had a look, but I haven't formed a full opinion yet. What it seems that we might need to think about is that there are parts of our conversation which tend to fall out of what we're talking about. And I think it's around the conversations around community, around other ways of sensing and other ways of embedding knowledge, whether it's behavioral or sense, like literal sensing and those sorts of things. And they often are coming up with Stacey or Wendy, or sometimes with me, and we may have a bit of a gender sort of thing that's starting to emerge there, which we probably just need to be conscious of. So that's my summary of where we've been, not necessarily in the topics, but just in the sort of structural conversations we've been having. And so that we could come to a point of then going, let's take an action and then move forward if we're ready to.
Jax, thank you. That's really thoughtful and useful. Any thoughts or additions or comments from anybody first?
Yeah, I love that. I'd like to suggest that these categories, as fluid and flexible as they can be, and we can adjust and adapt, be our directions that we could use to point towards where are we going? Who is the audience? What is the audience? And so on and so forth. What are the communities? What are, you know, the tools? What are the platforms? All of that kind of stuff. And so for us to have sort of a directional, to create over time, a directional sense of where we're going and what's the next adjacent possibility for each of those things. So have a sense of direction and a sense of what's the next step. I feel like I need to move, and for me, movement is knowing that there is a direction in this area, and that there is a next step that's possible in this area, and that's next step might be just clearing up something, knowledge that we don't have, understanding things at a more granular level, so depth. Having a bigger picture. I mean, any of those things are directional and are steps. But then having clarity about that and moving to the next thing, because I think it feels like we keep going around many, not clearly. Thanks, Jax. So that's now we have some clarity about the different things we're talking about. But then taking that and adding to it the direction we're going within each of those areas, and capturing that and making like, okay, this is the thing we're talking about. Next, this is what we're looking at. Next, this is how we think we might do this. Next, right? Like it's to me, that's really critical. Otherwise, yeah, I'm starting to lose focus in this project by not being able to do that.
Just a couple thoughts real quick. I have a hard stop at 2 minutes till the top of the hour, so I have 6 minutes here, and I can leave this room open so you can continue talking. I just have to prep for a different call that I'm supposed to be on at the top of the hour. I like using the circles outside of the NeoBooks group here as categories for our quest. And I'm wondering, this is a question sort of to everybody, are those the right categories, and how would we order them in a sense of priorities or pacing? Like, would we like to go from one to the other? And we can start building these things out together. We can sort of collect up what we think about them and answer these questions as part of this quest. That makes sense to me as a way of doing this, completing this a bit.
Personally, I'd say they're good enough to start, and they. I don't think we need to prioritize them. I think that we as individuals personally have our own priorities, and that we would focus on certain things in our different topics. I think prioritizing them may not necessarily help the diversity that we have.
Cool. I'm good with that. Marc-Antoine?
I'm going to be very dissonant here. I did find this useful, and I want to revisit it because I will admit I was kind of multitasking a bit, thinking about what do I have to say about this, but I was listening. And what I heard to me sounded like a list of concerns and more than a list of use cases or even success criteria. We need to be aware of this dimension, and I'm not, that's clearly useful. I don't want to but I would like, okay, what do we want to do about this? And when I was thinking about what I was thinking about when asking for use case was stuff like, okay, things I think we all agree of. We want modularity and transclusion. We want branching versions. We want, these are features. And really, I was beginning to write what are the extra features I want. It's like, wait a second, feature is not the right level. Why do we care about those features? I think, for example, modularity and transclusion, we want because we want to build a commons of knowledge that is accessible, reusable, combinable, so that everybody can both reuse and enrich a commons of knowledge for everybody. So for me, that's a high-level goal. And yes, within that goal, all these dimensions, contributors versus audience, how will it be received by communities, who are the communities that may interact with this? Those are all absolutely relevant concerns about who are we trying to address with this. But the big goal of having, hey, we want a commons of knowledge units that can be recombined. That's what I'm hearing. And what are the features for that? It's small things with reassembly in narratives. That's one feature. I've been, like, for example, I think most of us agree to the Caulfield's choral explanations as a desirable feature because different audiences. Now, how does the choral features interact with the narrative thread? Can I say, oh, somebody put a narrative together, but I'm at different level. Can I automatically get the appropriate narrative for my level of understanding for this sequence of ideas? For example, I don't know, is that a necessary feature or not? But that depends on is multi-level and being able to approach people at different levels of understanding on various topics. Is that part of the goals? For me, why I'm focusing on the structured conversation side is because the whole question of why is that believable? What are the expected side effects of a given action? All that I want to be very immediately available. So I have this whole commitment to various types of, some elements are argumentative structure, some are more hopefully constructive than argumentation, like argumentations about finding the truth. Finding a common project is not quite the same dynamic, thankfully. It's more collaborative, but still there is the notion of, again, what are the common goals? What I'm doing now, what are the common goals? What are the features that may bring us closer to this common goal, and so on? I mean, this is a structured conversation. And I want to be able to inject that structure or to sometimes overlay a piece of knowledge with here are the claims being made, here are the proposals being made, and here are the assumptions being made for those claims and proposals. And maybe that's an interpretation, and maybe I'm wrong, and somebody else can come in. That now I'm describing the Hyper Knowledge Project. I don't know if how much of that belongs in the NeoBook project. That's a question to you. But is having a basis of well-grounded structured proposals and statements, is that part of the NeoBook goal? And that's the
I have to
goal
bounce.
orientation. Yeah.
Jax, can I pass the con to you?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I apologize, and this is going really well. I wish I could stay on for another half hour.
Should I think it's a, Klaus has had his hand up, so maybe good time for you too. Muted.
Rocky thing here. Yeah, just very briefly, it's actually quite difficult to figure out your level of engagement, because if you go too deep, you get sucked in, and it eats up all your resources and your time. And if you stay too remote, then your impact is not really what you want it to be. So I'm approaching this sort of from a motto of servant leadership. You know, you're serving others who are in roles of support. So I'm working with the leadership in, let's say, the Sierra Club, or even locally here with chapters that are active here. But I don't want to get so deep in that all of a sudden I have to go to meetings and and I have to organize stuff. So I think the idea that we keep pounding around to set up a website, and I think Whitewind or whatever that is, whatever that is, right? To have NeoBooks in one place where we have segments of knowledge, right? So you're hosting a knowledge base for a specific audience, for a specific topic. Not all of us the same. We are not all of us addressing the same audiences. There are differences, but we are still learning from each other. We're still benefiting from our conversations and from what everybody is working on. So it's very challenging to figure this out, to be productive and helpful and so on. But I've been for some time saying, why don't we have a website, a NeoBook website, right, with topics? And I got to run. Okay. So
very quickly before you leave, what I'm trying to say is, I'm not sure we have the same idea of what the NeoBook is, and I'm trying to ask us to spend some time agreeing on what it is before we talk about it. Over.
Okay. Yeah.
And maybe that's maybe that's something to bring in for our next session. But and Jax, yeah, think that that's a good idea. I also want to acknowledge, though, in this is that what Jose was just saying before is there's also something about some testing here and actually stepping into something that's tangible, that we can actually go, well, is this what we think? Let's test something, and is this what we think? And then have the conversation with an artifact of some sort, which might give us some ways to actually connect it and ground it.
Muted.
I have a question for Jose, and it is this. Occidentals read your name and we say Jose, and that's because we're adjacent to Mexico, and Mexico, that would always be a Jose, but you got Jose. What is the origin story of that?
I'm from Portugal.
Portugal.
I was born,
okay,
and so in Portuguese it's the José,
Tuesday.
And people asked, so I answered, and it's pronounced that way. I'm good with either.
Well, you're obviously not offended by it, but you know, I have a number of Brazilian friends that where I picked some of this up, but I didn't the Portuguese as well.
Yeah. Well, the Brazilian comes from Portugal, essentially. So
but the pronunciation is different.
A little bit, yeah. But to the point of what Jax was just making, and to your point, Marc-Antoine, I don't think we're going to be able to define what NeoBooks is preemptively. I think our visions of what NeoBooks is are divergent to some degree and convergent in many ways. And I suspect that some of us have an idea of what it is in our heads that is more well-formed than others. And I think some of us have a better understanding of its power than others. And I don't think that necessarily is held by the same people. And so my sense is that what I liked about this from Jax is that it somewhat formalizes to a little bit of a degree our ability to distinguish what we're talking about. And not just that, in my opinion, to then say, in this context, we are doing this. We just said we are doing this. We have this discussion. We just agreed on this. We just thought that this is the thing. And let's say, this is what we said. Now, what's the next step in this area? Because I think we might get to a place where we will know collectively what a NeoBook is. Might. I at this point, I'm thinking it's like a 30% chance that we might. If we were to like allow ourselves to collectively learn what a NeoBook is, then we might actually get there. Otherwise, I think we won't. That's my sense.
I'm sorry, Marc-Antoine, go ahead.
Sorry. Two things. One is, it's precisely why I think it's extremely important to compare our scopes. I don't think the goal is to absolutely agree on the scopes. In that sense, will we fully define it? Who knows? I do think it is valuable to share the conversation about, for me, that's in scope, and hence those are features I think are important in view of those scopes. Not because we don't necessarily agree on the scopes or even the features, but it's a way to bring forward a discussion about aspects that each of us hold that we may not share. And I think spending the time of knowing, oh, you have this idea about NeoBooks that I don't, I think that's useful for all. And also saying, well, I think that you want to do this. I'm not sure you'll get it without this feature. That's another aspect that I think is important to put on the table. Again, we may not agree, but knowing where we disagree, I think, is valuable. I agree that this is not going to be a cascade planning where we'll define all the features before we do work. But I think that being a bit more aligned on what is it we're even trying to do is valuable, because I personally don't feel we have done that work, or at least not where I was involved. Maybe I came late to the conversation, and I think there's a lot of work you have done on this collectively. And I know you have your ideas strongly, but and some of it was imparted to me, and some of it is like, there's some I don't get yet. I've spoken about my ideas. I think looking at goals and features is one useful perspective. It's not the only one. I do think looking at the different concerns is absolutely valuable. Second point, very fast. I cannot make it probably for the next 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, probably starting from the next. Timing is wrong. Sorry. Unfortunate. I'll try to write something about requirements and send it. Or if you can think of a way of moving it, I'd be grateful. It's just Monday afternoon's not working. We could go back to before, but I know that's bad for Jax.
Yeah, and look, it could be I won't be able to come at this time, and I may not be able to come as a regular after the next couple of weeks anyway, because I'm moving into study. So it could be the opportunity to reset the time, because I know it was reset for me, which I'm grateful for, but we might not need to. But that's I can put that in an email to Jerry if you like.
So I'm listening to Jose, and I'm listening to Marc Antoine, and I realize, this is my realization, not necessarily yours, that the sensecraft vision of a quest is at play in the evolution or the coevolution of what you call NeoBooks. It basically is a quest which has a high-powered question. You could say, what are NeoBooks? And that's your high-powered question. And now we each give our views, and then we perhaps use some mechanism to look for a consensus within that growing conversation tree. This is what is known as theory U, the idea being that to design NeoBooks, that's the right-hand side of a big U. And the left-hand side is called sense making. What are NeoBooks? What do we want? What are the issues? What are the opportunities? What is the data? What are the impediments? What are the laws, etc.? In theory U, you start at the top of the left-hand side of a U and you descend it slowly to the bottom. When you reach the bottom, you are said to be present with the situation. Now, present means more than just having a big chart of all of the factors. It actually means understanding your own biases that you bring to the table and dealing with them, putting everything on the table. So everybody in this guild right now has an agenda, has a life set of experience, has world models, and they impact how each of us, individually approaches NeoBooks or climate change or anything. And the whole point of the Sensecraft mission was to allow people to be themselves in the space and do it constructively with everybody else. The idea being that you reach the bottom of the U and you are at peace with what you have said, and everybody else is at peace with what you have said. Now you can start climbing the right side of the U and doing the design or decision-making process that leads at the top of the U to whatever you call NeoBooks. Okay, so that is a physical flow of process. Now, what I want to highlight is every step of the way down and up the U is its own micro U. You make a step on going down. You've done the sense making part. Now you have to decide, this is the right side. What shall we do with it? So you're doing micro theory U's all the way down to the bottom and then all the way up to the top. This is a physical process, and we're trying to build that into a game-based questing ecosystem that allows humans to, let me state it this way. fundamentally humans, the present company accepted, lack conversational literacy. We're pretty damn good at it. We listen to each other. We deep listen. We're polite. We don't bring in freight trains of fake news. We know how to get along. On average, people don't. And we're looking towards the average, to the people who don't, and saying, we're going to make something that you'll think is fun and is exciting. And out the other side, we're not going to tell you this, but out the other side, you're going to be a better human. So if out the other side for us is the NeoBooks, then that's how I see the future. I don't see it any other way. My worldview has come to the point where, you know, growing up a little cross-eyed skinny kid and being everybody's punching bag, I kind of learned how you cope with the bullies of the world, and they're out there. My son was an adopted from South Korea, and he faced Asian bashing. And when we worked really hard to help him learn how to walk in the shoes of the bullies and try and understand where they're coming from. Well, that's theory U. Where are you coming from? It's also a Bohmian conversation. The idea being, look, we're going to go into this room, into the next room, and we're going to debate blah, blah, blah. But right now, Joe, tell me about yourself. Where are you coming from? What's your life like? And I'll tell you about mine, and let's talk about it. And let's get to know each other. Even though we, you know, you voted for Trump and I voted for the other guy. It's okay. How do we talk to each other? This is the way, and to me, it's the future of NeoBooks. I've said my piece.
I'm gonna need to drop off. I'm 15 minutes.
As do I.
late.
We all do. It's cool.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jack.
think-
That's probably a good note to end on.
exactly. Thank you.
See you all.
Ciao, everybody.
Thanks all. See you later. All the best today.